Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Britballin. I'm joined by an unusual host, but a host nevertheless, and friend of the show who's off and on, but replacing Adam, my angel from further north, Pete Laird. How are we doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Mike. How are yourself?
I'm very good. I didn't know whether to go with my Highland hero or angel of the further north.
How about the east? No, that sounds
No,
wrong.
no. Sure, weren't that a hurricane not long ago? Some bad weather. A stint of dull, bad weather from Scotland. How ironic.
Well, I'm just back from holidays, Mike. I've had a nice little break up in the Highlands, so I've missed all of the return to play for senior ball. And
nice slopey shoulders there from you, Pete.
Exactly, feeling nice and refreshed, and I hope you're doing well, and the return to play for your guys going great.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, well attended. Good to be really back in the swing of things, hitting things. So yeah, it's been going really well. Nice recruitment. Looking forward to the season. We had Warren Smart on last week's show talking about how he's managed to get the return to play going and the fixtures and all the good stuff that's been going on. So hopefully we'll just get back to hitting other people hard soon, which will be good. And I didn't realise you completely swerved being involved with any adult team, haven't you?
Yeah, I did at one point. I did 10 seasons back to back, and it just killed me. So
yeah. That's a surefire way to get single, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and oddly enough, it managed that twice. Now I make the definite break in the summer for myself. I always like to go along, see what senior teams are doing. Obviously, a lot of my guys are involved with senior teams, whether playing or coaching, and obviously we've got our youth and junior teams on the run as well. Yeah. So we've got that to worry about. So keep an eye on what they're up to.
And yeah, we are Adamless tonight for the first time in a long time. So Adam, he had some poor excuse about his car being broke down or something, and he's in Sunderland. But yeah, I think Adam's going to try and get home and get on. But we'll roll without the Geordie man for tonight. So it's just me and Pete. But obviously, unfortunately, when you're promoted to host, it automatically means no one's actually here to watch you. We are so welcome to that element of it. So they're only here to really for people tonight is to listen to one man and one man only. Richie Gray, welcome to the show. How are we doing, man?
Yeah, good on you. Cheers, guys. Mike and Pete, very well, and it's good to get a nice introduction. Obviously, I'm up in Scotland, so I've just come in from about 25 degrees of heat. The palm trees are swinging. The taverna life, it's rocking down here in Galashiels tonight. There's thousands out on the streets. The beach was beautiful this afternoon. Really enjoying the summer. Good on you, boys.
But I was going to say, bet the pubs are packed up there, aren't they?
They're getting busier. It's funny, we've all been living the same sort of way, and you kind of run out of anything to say because people say, what have you been doing? And pretty much I've been doing exactly the same as you've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months. So sitting speaking to these things, to be honest, you've spent your whole life on Zoom calls and Teams and pretty much in front of a PC, but it's always great. And I've done a number of kind of Zoom shows and bits and pieces over the last year with obviously football and with rugby. I'm involved in 2 or 3 different collision sports, so it's always good to catch up with you guys as well.
Well, at least on this case, we've saved the best till last. You've not been on the show before, and I'm sure it won't be your last time. So we've saved the best.
So, Richie, for the benefit of our audience, because I know you from way back, and I always tell a story about you, which is that we worked together about 30 years ago, and if there was two of us next to each other working in Galashiels, and if you say one of us would end up working with the Miami Dolphins, I would have bet my house it would have been me.
You've got a nice house. I've seen that, Pete. You've got a nice new house. I saw that the other day.
So I think it's probably worthwhile for our audience who might not have any idea who you are to give us your background and explain a little bit how a rugby guy from Galashiels falls into American football.
Well, it's one of the great stories, and my life has taken a few twists and turns over the years. I think it will make a good book maybe one day. I'm 51 years old. Live in Galashiels, married, 2 children. I was a PE teacher. I went through physical education college to come out to teach, and I never taught. I came out 1 year before rugby union went professional, And there was jobs then called rugby development officers, which was just a new job. Nobody'd ever heard of it before. So I thought, right, I'm going to apply for that. Came straight out, did 12 years with Scottish Rugby. And then sadly, we all lost our jobs. We were attached to the Border Reivers professional team. I had played, and then I was now coaching, development, academy, coach education, you name it, all the things that you do. And then we all lost our jobs, sadly. 55 of us, the whole team got binned, which didn't go down too well in this area. But all of a sudden, you had to kind of move off in a different sort of way. And I've always loved collision sports, so that was the start of it. And then I developed, as I'll tell you later on in the show, regarding training aids and all to do with collision and contact, I developed a training aid called the Collision King, which pretty much went worldwide. Most rugby teams will have one of them now, which was built to develop body position and contact collision in the ruck. And then after that, all of a sudden, I went back into teaching for 2 or 3 years, lecturing, sport, academy. And then I got a call from the South Africans to come down and help them, because by that time, I was a defence coach, forwards, and I'd pretty much given it up just to work on contact and collision only. And I thought I was absolutely nuts. I remember guys saying, listen, you're never going to get a job just working on contact and collision. But I knew that the way the game was going, we were only getting better conditioned. Systems and schemes were getting better. There was only going to be more contacts and collisions, which is exactly what's happened. So from there, I went and worked with the Springboks for 3 years down in South Africa with the sevens team and the 15s. Obviously got beat in the semi-final of the World Cup off New Zealand in 2015 down in England. They went on to win it. We went into third place playoff and beat Argentina. And then from there, I came back and worked in my own country, Scotland, for 2 years. And then from there, Montpellier in the French top 14 for 3 years. But to answer your question, Peter, because it could go on a long time, is how did I end up at Miami? How did I end up at Miami Dolphins? That's what you want to know.
Look, you're talking to me about rugby, and I don't care about rugby.
Yeah, exactly.
Just 17 viewers there, Richard.
I know. So literally, I'm sitting in my hotel room on the morning of the semi-final, South Africa versus New Zealand World Cup, and I get this on LinkedIn. I get a message from a guy called Wayne Diesel, who's got the best name ever, right? But Wayne Diesel, who was the high performance manager for the Dolphins. And I'd met Wayne about 15 years before in South Africa, and they'd looked at all the stats, as obviously all the NFL teams do, and they looked at tackles for, tackles against, breakdown, collision, and South Africa had really good stats. So they must have been sitting in the green room, and that was in the days when Adam Gaze was there, and you had, that whole group were there, and they must have thought, right, let's give this guy a phone. So they phoned me and invited me down for 5 days to work with their coaches, which I did. And then one thing just led to another. Typical, America, you're there for 5 days, really enjoyed it, really engaged well with the coaches. And they said, listen, would you come back and work with the players? And I ended up coming back about 10 days every month for the whole season. That was 2016. And they made the playoffs that year as well, which was brilliant. So you know how big a deal that is, and especially for the Dolphins, because they'd not made the playoffs for years. And I just had a phenomenal year. And, I was there purely tackle to pretty much work with the linebackers. I was in the linebackers room throughout the whole year. And I just learned so much. And I've always enjoyed football. I've always said that. I've always enjoyed football. I was kind of brought up on the Channel 4 diet when it was Dan Marino and Joe Theismann, Marcus Allen, the Fridge, Mike Ditka and the Chicago Bears, all that. That was my sort of era. I can remember it. I used to get allowed to watch the first quarter, then you had to go to your bed. So it was just brilliant. So one thing led to another. Miami, and then on the back of that, you've literally now created the full tackle programs for USA football that are getting rolled out across the whole of the US. Signed a 3-year deal with. Yeah, sorry, Peter, you go on. Hopefully that tells you why.
So talk to me about the USA football connection, because obviously the 5 fights is something that we're using in coaching now, but you were there right at the start of that.
Yeah, well, I created, what I did was I pretty much went back to the drawing board on tackling, and I thought we just need to completely rip it apart and start again, but make it in a way that you could. Thanks, Marcus, for the subtitles. I knew this was going to be a difficult evening, and the problem is the more excited I get, the faster I'm going to speak, Marcus. So apologies, right? I'm going to speak slowly. So, and you're lucky I'm not a couple of malts yet either. So, but no, literally,
well, that's the after party.
So,
don't worry about
that's the after party. So, literally, one thing led to another, and I started developing more and more equipment as well. So, the Dolphins have been using all my equipment, and I've now got about 45 pieces in total. But I always wanted to create a coaching methodology that would obviously go hand in hand with equipment, but at any level could use it. So, I developed the 5 fights, which is obviously it's not obviously the physical fight. It's the fight to get it right, and it's a mentality. And the 5 fights is fight to track, fight to prepare, fight to connect, fight to accelerate, and fight to finish. So there's 5 fights within the tackle, and then underneath each one of those fights, there's about 7 or 8 key PIs, like key performance indicators. So I wanted to create a system that literally the Dolphins linebacker or Vance Joseph, who is the defensive coordinator then at the Dolphins, could use at the very, very highest level, or it could be a parent that's just been asked to come along and help out at football for the first time, and over a period of 6 or 8 weeks begins to understand what track is, what prepare is, what connect is, what accelerate is, and what finish is. So there's nobody else doing it, I don't think, guys. I've written the methodology, I've created the equipment, and I'm also working at the highest level. So I'm incredibly lucky. And that's really the way that it all came about.
And this is why I hate you. But obviously the timing on this is really key, because obviously you're working with USA Football, alongside you're working on this 5 fights philosophy.
Yep.
Around about the same time as football's looking to change the way that they tackle.
Yep. So
and obviously we started looking at rugby about how do we tackle, how do we keep the head out of the tackle. So you must have been able to automatically bring some stuff straight across.
Yeah, and it's funny, Pete, right? I get really I'm not going to say annoyed, it's the wrong word, but when I hear the rugby fraternity, and I'm one of them, turning around and saying, oh, you know what, rugby can save football. It can't, right? Rugby's rugby, football's football, and we must never forget that. And I think now that I've been involved in football for so long, and I understand it far more than I ever did before, football's football and rugby's rugby. And I always say football it's like human chess played at 100 miles an hour, and it's over within seconds. So the scheme is incredibly important. The speed that it happens at is incredibly important. There's so many moving parts to football, and it's not the same sport as rugby at all. But there are some key crossovers, especially in technique, that can be used and can be developed. And obviously, the Seahawks sort of always will be given the starting point with Rocky Seto and the guys who did a great job at starting to bring things in. And I remember watching it thinking, you know what, it's a great start, but there's so much being left on the table there. So we just had to make it better and make it more advanced. And that's exactly what we've done.
No, that's brilliant. And then obviously for the so that's brilliant. So that what you're saying there is that that is applicable then for anyone. It doesn't matter whether that's the Dolphins or a parent and does that go across all kind of levels as well? Is that transgress into youth football or adult football? Is that the same across the way?
Like that's the beauty of it, is it can really be taken at any level, and if I've seen at the top level, and you guys will know as well, that NFL, the stats, the percentages, every single movement is measured. But within the 5 fights, you can actually take it to that level quite easily. Or if you don't want to frighten anybody away, you can bring it into the high school, you can bring it into the youth, you can bring it into college. So, we've had some brilliant feedback on it over the last, 2 or 3 years. And, it's just beginning to gather momentum. And, especially in the high school kind of youth space, is becoming really, really popular. And I think people just wanted especially the US coaches, just wanted something that just made sense. And you got to try and always create something that's simple. You can make things incredibly complicated if you want, especially as a coach, and I'm one of them. You've always got to think, hang on a minute, don't make things too complicated. But, the 5-fight system now, when you hear of other coaches coming back to you saying, listen, it's the best thing we've done, and it's really made it, very structured, but we can pretty much now drill down on any area of the tackle, and we can go from there,
Yeah, brilliant. Comment there from John. Anyone calling Marcus Allen in football is a true legend. And Marcus just reacting to I'm sure he understood what you were saying there. We've got a couple of questions.
Marcus, you'll notice I've started to speak slowly now for you. I'm speaking slowly.
Once we get excited.
Point out that you sound almost English to me, Richie. So
my wife's from Yorkshire, which is north of England. It's not proper England, but she's Yorkshire.
We've got a couple of questions coming in from Bafka themselves. Actually, I'm pretty sure I know who that'll be. So, just a couple of technical questions. How do you work at depth in the tackle at contact point? At the contact point,
and what do you mean by depth?
I'm assuming how low the player is getting at the tackle point, because we have a natural, again, best assumption, a natural ability to want to tackle probably at the belly level, and because we naturally block up high. How do you then kind of coach that sit down, really aim towards the knees, head across, I'm assuming, kind of way?
So I always class it as 3 levels, and this is where it was slightly different from everybody else's thinking, guys, is that in the US, tackles were given names. So it was the hawk tackle, it was the forum tackle, it was they all had a name to them. And I said, there's so many more, we're missing so much here. So I tackle in levels. So level 1 is it's foot to knee, level 2 is knee to hip, and level 3 is hip to nipple stroke, depending on the law of the game. So let's go to shoulder. So you've got your 3 levels, and every player that you coach should be confident to be able to hit each level with left shoulder and right shoulder, front and back. Now, obviously, in football, you want to be hitting on the front and you want to be hitting as square as you can. So to actually work on different levels, that's where, again, the equipment came really to the fore. Is when I went to the US and arrived in Miami, they only really had those orange tackle dummies with the black heavy bottoms, which, have been around for years. Don't get me wrong, they've been there for years, but you can't grip them because they're so tight. And also, I've never tackled a human being in my life where all their weight is in their feet. So you've got to create equipment that's got a real density to it, but it literally brings levels down. So, for example, on those orange tackling dummies, I could get it wrong and still knock the dummy over. Whereas if you go to a level 1 tackle dummy that we now use, it's literally 75 centimeters tall. So if you get it wrong, you're over the top, So you've got to force players and force them to get down. And especially your big players, they struggle to drop, And a lot of other things then come in. The guy talked about depth there, flexibility. What do you do in the off season, in the gym? All the programs should actually complement each other. And this is the biggest problem I see, not just in football, but in collision sports, is you've got your strength conditioning gym, which is like an absolute, coliseum of metal and machines and phenomenal, especially the ones in the US are incredible. Then you've got the field, and then you've got the medics, and everybody works in their own little silo. We should actually all be working together. So some of your biggest problems with poor tackling is actually flexibility. And it could be players coming back from ankle, knee, hip, back injuries. And remember, in the NFL, guys are coming back from surgery all the time. You've got to get them ready to perform again, not just to play. And I always hear this return to play. It should actually be return to perform. So there's a huge amount of work to be done there. But if to go back to the question of depth, you've got to train at that height. If you don't train at that height, you're going to struggle to bring it down. And that's where, training aids can be a massive benefit if they're used properly.
That's a whole other show talking about squats. But
yes, that's the strength conditioning world. I'm not a strength conditioning coach.
No, but I mean, it's true though, isn't it? And when people go into the gym, it's about how you appropriately use that. We did a lineman session the other week where, interestingly, a lot of the linemen were talking more about stretching and recovery and about that side of it than actually just going in and shifting metal. So there's obviously an element of...
It's funny, and I've said this a lot, and there might be some guys here listening that have heard me before, but we actually, most collision sports, the number one thing in collision sports that's given us the most grief at the moment is the tackle, right? I think the O-line in football has actually done a great job over the last 4 or 5 years of coming up with new techniques to keep, in some ways, the head out of it. When I look at some of the things that some of your key coaches, Bentley and the others that are looking at and the way they're coaching, they're looking at different techniques now. And I think it's really interesting to see them come forward. But tackling literally is still not coached enough, in my opinion. And most buildings that I go to in the US don't really have a tackle culture. So I go into these gyms and I look at all the banners and I look at, iron sharpens iron and all the big punching quotes, There's hardly any quote at all in the gym that crosses over to what happens on the field. So the bottom line is, when I'm coaching players in the gym, that they're getting strong to make them phenomenal athletes on the field. One, it's to prevent injury, but two, it's to make them a dominant athlete. I don't sometimes see the join up, and I think there's huge strides have got to be made there. So you've got to create a tackle culture in your building. That's the number one thing. And if the tackle is the number one problem or challenge for us from media, and everything else that we've talked about, then why aren't we doing it more? And why aren't we measuring it better than we are? Why haven't we got the guys on individual programs? What are they doing in the off season? It's incredible. Most of them do nothing in the off season because they can't tackle, but you actually can if you use training aids, Yeah,
that's brilliant. We've got a couple more technical questions here coming in, which keep you on your toes, I think, here, Richard. In American football, there's been a focus on throwing uppercuts in the tackle. However, is this a more straight punch through and clamp?
Yeah, so I was amazed, and again, because you've sort of come from outside and you've come into a new environment, and the best thing about the Dolphins in 2016, I still keep in touch with quite a lot of the players now that have, what happens in the NFL, they vanish all over the place. So, you've got Kiko Alonso's jersey behind me there. Neville Hewitt had just gone to the Texans from the Jets. You have Michael Thomas, who's at the Texans. There's a few of them have retired as well. But when I first arrived there was always this uppercut. They started really, really low and then came up on the back, and hands were always incredibly flat. So the finishing position was here, and then that was the drill over. And I used to think to myself, it's not in some ways the strongest position. That it's one position. Don't get me wrong; it's not wrong, but there's so many other things you can do. So it was amazing for me, having been brought up on shoulder, how difficult it was for a lot of these football guys that had come through a whole high school, college program, because everybody, that's what you did. And it's the same in any sport. If you try to change it, it's very difficult. So for me, I still think the initial shoulder connection and the speed of wrap is massive, then the clamp, then the grip, then the head. So if you can bring in speed of wrap, clamp, grip, head, all in one movement, it becomes like a vice, There's not many places to go if you get it right. The uppercut for me is one style or one technique, but it's not one that can be used all the time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where we can take from rugby, because you just need to watch a rugby game to see how many times they tackle. It's a lot more, isn't it? It's more frequent, and they do miss less tackles.
Yeah,
it's actually a stat. It's a key stat, isn't it, in rugby?
Massive, Mike, massive. And it's funny. Yeah, when I first did an analysis on the linebackers, I was maybe analysing 12 tackles for one guy in the game.
Yeah,
and that was a good game, or 14 or 16 or 18. I was used to analysing 25, 26 per player in rugby union. But as I've said before, Mike, it's a different game. It's a different game. And the speed of it and the setup. And I always used to say, you can have as good a scheme as you want, but if your guys can't tackle, you're going to have problems, you know?
Yeah.
And I saw some brilliant scheme coaches, but sometimes what let their scheme down was the player, you know, the inside linebacker who struggled on his left shoulder. That was what was going to let you down. And you know the stats that are done in football, they'll find your shoulder. They'll know that you're slow across the ground. They'll know that your third step isn't quite good enough. You'll know that you don't get off a block that well. That it was microscopic detail. I used to call it forensic detail to the movement of these players. And incredible. You know, I find it was fascinating to me, and it still is. I love it. It's a phenomenal sport. Phenomenal sport.
I'm going to attempt to read this next one out again, but we can all just stick with me on this. Within the track and prepare phases of firefights, does there need to be a distinction between the swoop and shimmy? Would that be used as well as the difference between near foot shoulder contact as two-footed power plant and accelerate? Well done, me thinking that out.
No, listen, good man. Like, it's spot on.
It goes on Spotify, so I needed to read it out.
No, I totally understand that. Well, and that was another thing for me. The swoop was this sort of, it came towards you. It was more like, I used to look at it as, you know, when you were fencing and they would be going up the track and then back down the track, this sort of swoop. And it was, but in saying that, it's a good technique for football. And that's what you got to remember, because especially in that traffic where it's full on for that 3 seconds, that actual stance, that swoop stance, is actually keeps you strong all the way through. The shimmy or the buzz, I've heard it called a number of things, you know, shimmy, the buzz, the paddle, that's more for getting yourself ready, bang, for a 2-footed placement, and then up and drive and push the hips through. So it's far more close contact type hit than maybe going to a touch line or a defensive back having to track and tackle. You're going to get more of what I would class as a run through on that tackle. So there's different foot movements, and it's a good question. When it comes to the preparation phase, there are many different foot movements that you've got to be used to, depending on the traffic and the bodies around you and what's in front of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. I think just to reveal the man behind the mask here, I think we're pretty much all sure British American Football Coaches Association is definitely going to be Wayne, isn't it? These are far too technical to not be Wayne, aren't they? Let's be honest.
I've had many good discussions with Wayne, so I just.
I think he's putting you through your paces here.
He's doing a good job, actually. He's doing a good job. I hope to think of you.
Can I just extend that a little bit? So really what we're trying to make the distinction of is this difference between open field and close proximity tackle, right? And when the move went to, you know, keeping your head out of contact, I think a lot of people got really scared in terms of how to teach close proximity tackle because it felt almost impossible to keep the head out of contact. And then we have on the flip side, open field, we went almost into the rugby tackle from, you know, back in my day, head was in front. And I always remember a coach telling me, well, don't worry if you miss a tackle, he'll fall over you.
But you know what, Peter, it's funny.
I'm absolutely fine.
Well, you know something, Pete, it's funny because I've been around a lot of US colleges as well where it's still head across the bow, you know? And I used to say, right, you know, because I'm never going to say someone's right or wrong until I know it inside out. You know, I'm new to this sport, or was 4 or 5 years ago. I've maybe been around it quite a bit now. And I can understand why the head went in front, because it put all of your body in front of that runner, you know. And also, you got a helmet on, you know, so you can afford to put your head in front of that part of the kind of chest and lower abdomen, because you've got a helmet on, you're going to be protected. Where it gets horrible is if you put your head in front of that sort of knee area, you're going to really come off second best, you know. So I can see where head across has come from. But again, you look at the amount of players now that shoulder tackle in the NFL, boy, there's a huge amount now. It's just sort of tipped over the last couple of seasons, especially, and you're right, Pete, especially out wide. Because it's the best tackle, you know. Yeah. And remember, the best thing you can ever do as a tackler is get square. The more square you are, square is strong. It's still the best quote ever. Square is strong. You've got to get square. And when you're in the close traffic and the real battle of the trenches, sometimes it is a double foot plant, drop, and then hit and knock back. So there's a number of different tackles that you have to be ready to use, position specific within football. Whereas in rugby, pretty much you have to be a master of them all, you know? Yeah. Football, different world. But
I suppose the common denominator, I'd still say, no matter where you're tackling, it's about, and it's very cliche, but it's about getting as low as possible, isn't it? Because...
Yeah, especially in football, it's about stopping the yard, Mike, isn't it? It's as simple as that. You've got to stop the yard. And that was the one thing that became glaringly obvious to me in my year at Miami was it's all about the yard. You've got to stop the yard. So, you know, instead of it being a 3-yard gain, he only makes a 2-yard. It's a bonus, you know? And that's the key. So that's where the real precision comes, is you've got to stop yardage. You can't let them pick up yards on every play, or you're going to be in trouble, you know.
I mean, it's funny you say as well. Sorry, Pete, I know you got a question, but it's funny how, like you've mentioned there, things move on. Well, now we're seeing more hurdles because of the lower tackling and more open field tackling. So, I mean, it always makes for a better product and a better game, but there's nothing better than a good clean hurdle, is there?
Well, the thing is, too, I always say you got to try and stay as big as long as you can as the tackler. And all the hurdles that I've seen this year, and I've seen a number of them in the NFL, the tackler is just giving away everything by just dropping too quick. To be honest, he's not even looking at the ball carrier, because all the ball carrier's seeing is the top of that helmet and thinks, I'm going to have a hurdle here, you know? So everything comes from reading the body language of the tackler when you're the ball carrier. And sometimes they just give away what they're going to do so early. I cringe still, boys, when I see, you know, a running back bouncing off a 1, 2, 3, getting through, despairing tackle, 4 guys get beat. I'm going, man, what's going on there? If you're there, you got to make it. You know,
everyone in the world is over the moon when Marshawn Lynch runs off one of his beastquake and Richie's pulling his bloody hair out.
I'm pulling my hair out. Well, it's amazing. You know, I got a phone call this year from an NFL team to have a look at Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson beats a lot of tacklers, right? And he does it because he's got an excellent feel for run, stop, jink, run, stop. And a lot of these players are coming at him like an arrow. They're coming flying out the traps to nail him. Sometimes they're the easiest guys to beat. So when you're trying to stop Russell Wilson, what we worked on with this team was attack the space, then paddle, because you're not then committing. You're closing the space down as much as you can. You're paddling. Then you've got a better chance of getting him. If you just run a straight line at Wilson, he's going to step you every time, you know? So we had a great week looking at Russell Wilson. We did. And it actually ended up being a good weekend for that team.
Love that. Just drop that in. Not mentioned it before. Just, I did a week just focusing on how to stop Russell Wilson. Not bad resume there, Richie. I'll give you that.
You know what? It's great, boys. It's great for me because it's like you'll get a phone call. And don't get me wrong, this is the great thing and the bad thing about the NFL. Most of the coaches I worked with in Miami in 2016 are now scattered across the league. I've got they're at New Orleans, they're at the Cardinals. We've got the Jets. There's a couple now at one at Cleveland. There's about 2 or 3 at Cincinnati. They're all over. So you had a really good relationship with them for the year. And also you're this Scottish guy who only concentrated on tackling. And who, to be honest, not quite right. You know, not quite right in the head. So literally, you know, you've got a great relationship with them. And the amount of times I get a phone call, usually most of them are usually using my kit as well. So they've been great advocates of the equipment. And you'll get a phone call saying, have a look at this, for example, running back, you know, he comes flying to the line, then chops, then goes, or he's a straight runner, or this quarterback moves this way. What do you think? And you have a great week really trying to analyse it. And then you watch it at the weekend on the big screen, you're thinking, right, let's see how they're going to go here. And you can see things that you've been speaking about. And if they do manage to get at him and stop the yardage and bring him down and sack him or whatever, geez, it's like you've won a gold medal, and I'm sitting back in Garlic Shields in a garage in the middle of Scotland thinking this is brilliant.
I'm just imagining Simon Hatcher screaming at his screen right now that Richie stopped Russell Wilson from his garage in Garlic Shields.
Certainly wasn't me.
I think Adam's commented saying he's done a good lot. So Adam's usually a co-host. He's asking you to just make a few calls and get him on the show for us. You know, you can pull some strings. Well, don't worry, Adam. We'll leverage Richie. I'll bribe him off there. Don't worry about that. Every man's got a price. I think Wayne with another technical question. Pete, sorry, you had one, mate. Go on. Have we moved?
No, I like that. So Arrowhead is now.
I was actually going to talk about obviously in the 5 fights. For me, preparation phase is all about, you know, if you get that wrong, everything else falls apart, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think, to be honest, Pete, I think we sometimes don't spend enough time on tracking, you know, because if you actually get your track wrong, then I'm just going to bring up, because I've always got my indicators in front of me. If you think of tracking first and foremost starts with film study, because you've got to know who you're up against, especially in football. Let's talk about football here. The key thing about tracking is film study. You've got to know their scheme, or as best you can, and you've got to know the players within it, because, and I say this about any sport, especially collision sports, every player has a trait, right? Every player has a trait. The way they run, the way they move, the way they carry a ball, the way they go into a tackle, out of a tackle. Everyone's got a trait. So you've got to do a lot of work on looking at the key, what our class is, head on a plate players that you want to take out and make it a difficult afternoon for them, or a difficult evening, and find out what they're all about. So that's the key thing. And then it's the whole angle, approach, leverage, pace that you're coming in at, speed. Get that bit right. Then you're into preparation. So your track actually brings you into preparation. And then after that, it's balance. It's getting your foot in close. It's getting square. It's dipping late, so you don't dip too early. As I said before, the amount of times tacklers give away what they're going to do. There's a real, for me, if this is the tackler, there's a real quality technique in dipping at the right time. If you go too early, this guy goes, he beats you. If you go too late, boom, you're away. So it's when you dip and when you don't dip. Really important. Don't practice it enough, you know, especially at pace. So there's a number of different... Go on, sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, have you got that kind of... Is there a tip for that, or a trick for that? Is there a kind of one... If I was a DB now thinking about, is there a certain point where I think now... Do you know what I mean? Or is it too... Is it too high impact to isolate that?
No, you've got to... It just comes with practice, and it just comes with trying... You will find out yourself when's the best time for you to commit and not commit, you know? And it's a thing you do with young children, you know? And the other thing for me too is you've got to get, for maximum power, elbows in, hands above elbows, you know, that sort of boxer type stance instead of this, you know, the old flying arms. And I still see it. These huge arms coming in, and then bang, one goes through 2 yards made. Should have been 0, ended up being +2 or +3. So Pete, you're right. The preparation phase is huge. When you ever talk about tackling anybody, usually they talk about the collision. It's the shoulder and it's the big hit, but there's so much else goes on before that happens. Yeah. You know, it's really important.
Yeah, it's like Mike's just talking about. Obviously, there's a lot of players going back to contact right now for the first time.
Yeah.
A year plus.
Yeah.
So, you know, that rustiness will be shown in that, you know, it'll be high tackles. People won't be low enough. The head will be down.
Yeah.
For me, you know, I guess I'm with Mike here. It's like, what can we tell these guys out there getting back at practice? What do they need to focus on?
Yeah, key thing for me, you'll never ever come away from tracking because you have to get to your target. That's as simple as that. So it's just getting your timing right, when you drop, when you don't drop, getting a touch on the near side hip to begin with. But after that, you've got to get used to that wrap, clamp. I talk about arrowhead a lot, which is literally ear to helmet, helmet to body. I don't want to see the old vibrating head on the side of my body. You've got to be in strong and tight. And you've just got to practice it at real low level to begin with, and then just build it up and build it up and build it up. It's not rocket science, you know. We've all coached for a long time. Do you want to go straight into it, boom, a hit? You're just going to have guys smashing the life out of each other because we're actually not that good at it at the moment. We've not, our technique is really rusty, if we're being horrible about it, because we've not done any tackling for about a year, you know. So it's pretty much a sort of reboot of everything that I've got to do again, and a lot of it you're going to walk through to begin with, you know. And also, but definitely slow it down. Get the key points, you know, the movement, the dip, staying square, shoulder, wrap, clamp, grip, head, acceleration, feet. Use your feet after tackle. Most footballers don't. Big connection, big wrap, no feet. You know, at the end of the day, we're here to dominate the opposition. You're not going to dominate them if you just land and that's it. Let's drive them. You know, you're putting them back. You want them to know you're there. So, and again, training aids comes into it. And I hate, you know, I'll always come back to it because I've been a great advocate of them. If you use training aids properly, they can really help you. You can go full on in a training aid and it's not bone on bone, you know?
Yeah, no, brilliant. And again, a good comment. I think what you alluded to before, and just a comment there. Rugby off season, they used to do 3 sessions a week with wrestling and jiu-jitsu, probably just to teach that leverage. And we've done it before, where we do for our offensive line. We've done a lot of like boxing and stuff just to get quick with hands and stuff like that. So
you look at Mike. If you look at the league boys will spend a lot of time in the old dojo. You know, they're in there and they're just used to moving around bodies, getting elbows in tight, head tight in, keeping yourself close. It's just building up contact, and it's confidence actually. Once you get confident again, then you can start to bring in pace.
And it applies to everything. Once you start to feel that, and it just becomes with experience, doesn't it? Then you start to understand what close-up contact actually feels like. Simon's got a question here. We often see follow-up tacklers knocking the first tackler off the ball carrier. Any insights in helping with that?
Yeah, that kills you, doesn't it? You know, you see a player that's actually in a great position, he's halfway through his action, and then the next player comes flying in. It's all vision for me. And also, it's just taking a different area of the body. So both sports have the same problem. Rugby union and football both have this, where what a class is, it's kind of negative desperation, you know, so desperate to get there and help, but it's actually a negative, you know. So what you've got to do is, Mike, if Pete's coming at us with a ball and you've gone in at chest, then I've got to make a conscious decision to get in below you. If you've gone low, then I get in above. So it's always there, or it's there. It's not there and then there, because it's a disaster. So again, it's vision. And a lot of players, especially in football with a helmet, I found, because I'd never worn a helmet before, put a helmet on and tackle. It's completely different because your vision's slightly different. You've got weight on your head. It's a totally different experience, and that's where they're 2 totally different sports. But the second person in has got to keep laser focus on a point that his mate isn't at, but still on the body of the carrier to inflict, obviously, maximum pressure onto them.
I mean, the way we always taught that, and I've not done it for a while, was just second player looks for the ball, and they just look to whip the ball. There's nothing else.
Well, it depends if it's a takeaway, Mike, because I learned a lot in football about the takeaways. You know, the old peanut punch from behind. Different techniques to get rid of the ball, because the ball's everything in football. And I could never work out, you know, simple guy here. Sometimes the running backs run with it, you know, like this. These things, how can they generate pace when their arms are here? You can't lose the ball in football. You can't lose it. It's a crime, you know. So. You know, lose the ball, lose your job. It's as simple as that. And that's where I just sometimes think that if the ball's open, then a lot of players are going to try and create a hit on that ball with maximum impact. But you don't want to be knocking the tackler off because one man, one job, you know.
So one of the things I've been very lucky that we managed to do a wee session with you, working alongside your training aids. And one of the things I've always found about you, Richie, you're really innovative in terms of even if it's drills that you're bringing in and the tackling stuff. But I kind of want to talk to you about the tackling aids, and it's only fair we give you a little push here and a bit product placement.
Good lad, Peter.
A little plug there. Little plug for Richard.
Talk to us about the tackling aids and where that came from.
Man, you know something? It all came from the methodology. So I'd spent so long in ripping the tackle to bits and building it back up again. And then when I went to the NFL, and I went onto a multi-million-pound facility with multi-million-dollar players, and I'm looking at the training aids. And don't get me wrong, there were some great sleds. There's some really good stuff there. But I'm just concerned about tackling. So all I'm looking about is tackling. And really, there was hardly anything on the field. And I thought, man, how are we going to change this? So I then just took all my methodology and I developed training aids that literally link to each part of my coaching methodology. So they're not there as a gimmick. They're there to bring around a real change in the technique of the player. So first of all, there's 3 different levels for every single bag. Level 1, level 2, level 3 that we've talked about already. So you train at the level, you train at the density, train at the weight. That's the number one thing. You've got your plain bags. You've got your bags with grip points on them. So the black spines that run down the side of the bags that you can actually grip. So if I'm a coach watching my players training on that equipment, if I don't see you getting a grip of those bars, I'm going to be on your case. So it's wrap and grip, density, good weight of bag. Then we created the Grapple Bag, which is pretty much 5 cylinders all joined on the middle cylinder. So you can't quite grip that. So it literally brings in forearm and that clamp. It totally isolates that. Every single piece of kit, and there's many others, have all been developed to isolate a certain technique within the tackle. Simple as that. And when people start to work with them and coaches work with them, it's like the penny drops that I totally get this. But the great thing too is, Peter, you can actually train with them as a player on your own, and the bit of equipment will give you feedback. Because if you don't get it right, you won't be able to hit it properly, and you'll just have to start again. You know, so they've been used huge. I obviously very lucky. We signed a contract with Riddell, who are your number one football company on the planet, pretty much, with the helmets and the padding and whatever. They've now become protect and perform. That's their main thing, and they're trying to look at performance and build up this whole area of the tackle. And with our insight technology with the helmets, they can now tell you, and it's been brilliant for me, certain times of the season when our head impact's happening more than others. And it's been really interesting to develop equipment and drills around even certain times of the season. Start of the season's a nightmare in the NFL. They're off for 20, 25 weeks. And then they come back to tackle in camp. It's a recipe for disaster. So how can we get our players battle ready and ready to perform to come back? And training aids is definitely a way. And even last week, Peter, you guys will know that the contact time at college football's changed. So there's going to be less actual bone-on-bone contact time. Training aids are going to be the way that you're going to get around that, You'll never beat live practice, though, guys, and that's the number one thing. You'll never, ever beat live practice, but you can't go live all the time.
And if you do want to order some of them, the perfect plug here, you can get over to our sponsor, EP Sports. That's one of the only ways.
Joe Black and the guys, they'll all be there.
Yeah, they sponsor the show. There's no other provider that actually give it out in the UK, so just go to EP Sports. You can't get it anywhere else, I've checked. And if Richie tells you otherwise, I've got the power to mute him, so don't worry about it.
I'll tell you where else you can get.
It was a pleasure having you on, Richie. It was really nice, but I think he was just about to start talking about. I'm talking about you. I'll do that to you.
The great story, guys, is you can't beat a story. Sorry, Peter. And I grew up watching Channel 4, as I said at the start of the show. I think it came on at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and you managed to get a quarter, and you had to go to your bed. And you can always remember like Don Shula and Dan Marino. Dan Marino was like, he was the man, wasn't he? And the number 13 jersey and the full thing. So on the very first day I'm at Miami, and I've been around professional players for years, so you never really get that sort of, oh, geez, that's what do you call him? It's another player and it's another person. You just get on with it. We're all the same, 2 arms, 2 legs, the head. But I'm walking down the corridor, and there's this guy walking towards me, and I'll tell you what, it was this spitting image of Dan Marino. This guy looked like Dan Marino, and I'm thinking, I wonder how old Dan Marino is. So I went back to Wayne, who was in the high performance lab. I said, you know what? I said, I'm sure I just passed Dan Marino. He said, oh no, he's coaching here. So phenomenal guy, and had been helping out coaching the quarterbacks. And I remember telling him this story. I said, what a laugh. I said, I remember on a Sunday night in Scotland, you used to watch this, and thankfully, if I can get him, there's his jersey up there. So literally, that's one of my favourites of all time up there.
Have I already said that I hate you?
It's signed as well if you want, Pete. Just
aye.
It's not what
it's not a good thing.
It's not your colour, Pete. Don't worry about it. It's not your colour.
The other great story was I was walking out the building on the first day to coach, and this little guy with a clipboard comes behind me. Mr. Gray, coach, because you get called coach all the time, which is strange because you don't get called that in the UK. And especially with rugby, you don't get called that. And it's coach. Yeah, I get called a lot of things. Coach, can we see your insurance policy? And I went, pardon? Your insurance policy. So obviously, all companies in the UK have got your, public liability, and it's all the same. It's up to about 5 million or whatever. So anyway, I had to go back in and showed him the policy. Oh, he said, listen, you're about to coach a guy called Adomaga Sue. He's $110 million. He said, you're not going to get close to him until we've got you on our insurance. So I had to go upstairs, and I had to sign on their insurance policy, or they wouldn't let me coach. So classic.
That is pretty good. That it's not something you'd ever experience. You have the 5 million PI cover, don't you? In what eventuality will that not be enough? Can you imagine? Can you imagine the broker back in the UK? We've had a full £5 million claim because Richie had Ndamukong Suh's back's been put out because he was trying to tackle this level 1 75 centimetre dummy.
Mike, you make a good point about it. So you're level 1, the lowest bag you've got. In fact, no, I'm thinking of the heavy one. What's that called again?
The wrap and roll.
Oh, the wrap and roll.
So that's got a cylinder inside it with kiln sand. If you don't get it right, you just lose it every time.
Now, I was very fortunate. You showed me some footage of some NFL players attempting to tackle that bag for the first time around. For the benefit of our viewers at home, what happens?
Well, the thing is, because of the height so low, and if you've only ever trained at like level 3, and remember, in the good old days, it was face mask to face mask. As a coach said to me, we put our triangle on your triangle. And I said, explain to me what that is. He went, triangle is head, shoulder, shoulder, onto your triangle, head, shoulder, shoulder. And he said, after that, it's eye, nose. That's the next triangle. So you can imagine, and that was, we think now, oh my word, but that was what the norm was. Rugby was the same. We trained live for an hour. Guys got smashed up to bits. It was like a kind of Medal of Honor. We didn't have a clue, really. But these guys, Pete, to go to your question, literally went over the top of the bag every time. They couldn't actually get down that low. There's guys kicking it and you name it, But within about a fortnight, we got it down. And listen, the one great thing about the players, you know what players are like. They don't want to be second bested at all, even if it's a bit of equipment. And I tell you what, it used to be, you could see them zone in. It was like, right, there's no way this bit of kit's making an idiot of today, so I'm going to get in about it. So
would you get in a couple of backhanders so they could take it home? Like they just Kiko slipping you $50. Just let me borrow that there, will you, coach?
It's funny. Like I've had a number of the boys now have the stuff and use it in the summer, So they have it because they, it's like they'll maybe all be in Miami, but in the off season, they just scatter and they all go to their own training zones and guys that maybe conditioners that work with them. So a lot of my stuff's all over the US with these guys. They've got the level 2 bag in the back of the car, or they've got the dip and rise shield. So it's great. They've been, to be honest, those boys have been brilliant. Seriously, the guys I had at Miami, the linebacker group, on backing my equipment and being quite open. And Michael Thomas has been phenomenal, who's at the Texans. Neville, Hewitt, as I said, Kiko. I'm trying to think who else there was. Quite a few of them retired, actually. Jelani Jenkins, Spencer Paysinger. These guys all retired pretty much a couple of years. But there's still a good young group there, So, they've been excellent. Really good boys. Really good guys. Couldn't speak highly enough about them.
So I'm just thinking, Richie, if we take this back to Britball and the UK game, with all these players coming back to practice right now, and some teams will have some of your training aids, other teams may not be so fortunate. But I'm just thinking there's 2 questions here for you. So let's talk about, as players are getting ready for contact, what type of approach distances are you wanting them drilling on? As they're getting, let's just say it's a bog standard tackle back. I mean, I've seen players running up from 20 yards, leaving their feet and firing through a bag. And then also talk to me a little bit about tackle rings.
Okay, so I think there's 2 or 3 answers in your question there, Pete. For me, you're always starting one-on-ones in wrestle and movement around the body. So I'd always warm up with that. And then I would go into, especially in the first 2 or 3 weeks, I'd be full on. I'd do a lot of work on training aids at different levels. Now, listen, not everybody's got the kit. So you can easily, put a target around the bags. Just make sure you're working at different levels. And it's not just a straight 5 people running at a bag, smacking it as hard as they can. Next one, waste the time.
I've seen duct tape at 3 levels of those ring bags.
Definitely. You can do things like that. And also get them as quickly as possible to come off blocks. So do something before they come into the tackle. Don't just do a straight run. Football is made up of a number of levels of things going on. So try and replicate it within your drill. So even an up-down into coming off a block, then into the tackle. So there's like multiple movements going on. Don't just go straight line, one at a one, because it's not difficult, So build it up on training aids and then start to go live slowly, fully padded up. Get everything on if you want, but just maybe do it at half pace to begin with. But get the technique right, and just keep hammering the technique. Tackle rings destroy me. They're an absolute nightmare. Most of them are too light. You have 250-pound human beings running into a piece of foam that literally is not going to give anything back at all. So, there's actually a new tackle rings being created by this guy. I'm trying to remember. It's got grip points on it. It's a fantastic bit of kit, and I think.
Is there anywhere they can get that from?
I think there is, yeah. I think it's a website he showed recently. So literally, it's got the grip points on it. They're heavier. The hole in the middle smaller, so you've got to be more accurate, and it puts a bit of pressure on you. So, there's no right and wrong. You guys know that as well. But if you're going to use training aids, use them properly. But again, and I say this, and I'm a guy that creates training aids, you'll never beat live practice, ever. But you can't go live all the time.
Oh, yeah. You mean the old Wrap and Grip 360? Is that?
That's the one, Mike. Is that the name of it, Mike? Is that what it's called?
I've just Googled it and it just pops up there.
I wanted to ask you that loaded question because we discussed tackle rings at length and I thought you were a hater. And then all of a sudden I see it sold out.
No, I've changed it, Peter. I made it better. There's nothing wrong with making something better. You've always got to keep moving forward.
So what's the difference? Did you say genuine? Because at every club I've ever been to, I've seen a tackle ring. What's the difference in? I'd rather say if we're going to talk about it. What would be the difference in something like this ring as opposed to?
So the thing is, there's grip points on it, which there's no grip points on the other ones. They're just a plain ring. And this one's been specifically developed to bring around exactly what we've been talking about. You've got to be far more accurate in your track, because if you imagine, I'm going to draw a little picture here, very simple, but literally, if you look at that, I don't know if you can see it.
There you go. I brought it up.
Yeah, he's bringing it up on the screen. You're some man. So you see this here, when this rolls, it literally goes from square to diamond as it rolls. So first and foremost, I'm always asking my players, I'll tell you what, you see when this is rolling across the field, I want you to hit it on the square. So that would be the square. Or I'll hit it on the diamond, because it's moving, obviously. So it's far more specific in tracking. And then the hole's smaller, so you're really looking at a fast punch with this inside arm. And then the grip points are on both sides of it. So there's a replication of this on the back, and you can get through and you can actually grip something, you know, because the biggest problem in missed tackles for me is sometimes the player does a great job, but it's his hands that let him down at the end. Get a grip. So everything's about gripping and making sure that you hit it accurately, and it's a good height. It's a level 2 height they're up in grip 360. So it's just, it's easier to coach on as well, guys, because instead of just a bit of foam rolling across the field, if I don't see a good punch with that near side hand coming through and it hits off the ring, then I know it's poor. If I don't see a good grip at the end of that tackle, I know that it needs to be worked on. And also I want to see them hit it at the right time, so their tracking's got to be spot on. So you can make everything, you've got to make things difficult before they come easy. It's a great quote, isn't it? Everything's difficult before it comes easy. And those bits of kit they're tricky when you first start, but all of a sudden the penny drops and you can work and they make a difference, and that's the best thing.
Yeah, it's like football's easy till you get hit in the mouth. It's a bit of a difference.
Mike Tyson said everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So it's a good quote.
Wayne had another good question here. How much emphasis, and again pertinent to the time now, how much emphasis would you put on coaching tackling without a helmet and shoulders? And develop techniques first, especially in return to play, or are you a fan of just
massive? No, I definitely, Mike. I think because we're in such a strange sort of comeback to play at the moment, I would definitely go without pads and helmet to begin with, and just get a fit and feel for body on body again. I think it's really, really important. And then after that, and this is where football's completely different to any other sport, you got to get the kit on, and then you've got to really start it again. But I would always go without the kit to begin with and just get used to the different techniques, walk it through, jog it through, run it through, build it up in the gym if you have to, or out on the grass one-on-one. And then after that, you start building up the protection, and then you go again, because it does change. It's funny enough, I thought the only way I'm going to get to understand this is put pads and helmet on myself, and I did. And everything's about half-inch away when you put the shoulder pads on, because it takes you from here, bone, literally you're up to here, so your grip's slightly less. You can't get your head in as tight because you're in a helmet. It makes a massive difference, and if you've not worn helmet and pads before, you wouldn't understand.
Brilliant. One of the questions I did have, and obviously more like a lockdown question, but still pertinent now. A lot of people will be training on their own and taking, if they're going to got training on a Wednesday, they might not be able to get up in pairs to work on tackling techniques. Have you got any tips or techniques for players who could just do it on their own, in the field, in the back garden, in order to get low? Have you got any certain strategies that you would, ask them to do on their own?
I think for me, it was funny because I was with the Fijians in November and we all caught COVID. So we were locked in a hotel for 14 days, 3 meals a day, and everybody had to train on their own. So literally a lot of the stuff we did was like individual movement. So all fours, roll on the ground, back onto your feet, a lot of crawling, even isometric holds against something that's static, just so you could grip, because you can do very little on your own when it comes to tackling, because you really you need another body there. But there are things you can do to just keep yourself primed until you then go back to it. If you've got training aid, then great, chuck it in the back of the car. At least you can work on something. Sorry, Pete, did I get that chucked in again there?
Or a girlfriend. Or just get your girlfriend in the backyard. Yeah, come on, love, let's just keep practice it.
You know, or a tree. You can sometimes hit a tree, but they don't move. I found them, they didn't give a lot back to you, a tree. Silver birches do, but you find the fir trees quite hard. So you get quite a lot of those marks in your shoulders. I found the boxer tree and the silver birch, it gives a bit, you know.
But I suppose, so the key there is just everything is, from what I'm guessing there, is just keeping low. It's all about just getting used to being as low as possible. And
layer it up. And remember that every player to shape and size will have an optimum height that they like to make connection at. 6'6" to 5'10", different dynamics altogether. So, you know, there's no point in asking players to do things that they can't do. You know, and it would have been a waste of time for me to, for example, see a D lineman at 6'8" and 290 pounds keep trying to push him to do a level 1 when I looked at his film and he never made a level 1 tackle in his career. He's always been at level 2 or 3. So there's no point in asking a player to do something that they're not going to do in the game. That was why in tackling you would even practice the tap tackle. And folk will say, well, that never happens. Well, have a look at it. Sometimes it does, you know, especially in football. It's any way you can to bring the player to ground. So you've got to just make sure that you're a multi-purpose tackler. I've always said that. You try to create a multi-purpose tackling machine, you know.
Yeah. And I suppose if your frame's £300 and their frame's 200, you don't need to get down to their level. You can just tackle that like that level 3 and probably get the job done just as well.
Yeah, you can. You look at some of the big linemen that come round the side, you know, and manage to get that sort of, the whole body just falls on top of you, you know. That's what they do, you know, and that's what they're good at. So everyone's got strengths and everybody's got weaknesses.
I don't know if this is a development point. One to take back to the thought process. John Wise, could it? I think it's in the grip of the wrap grip 360. Could it be adapted and be weighted? That word. So,
asymmetrically.
So the movement isn't so linear.
Listen, it's a good call, and it's funny. We've worked with a number of different sort of prototypes, and we had one with water in it, so it sort of moved, and we even tried different types of circle. But sadly, John, a lot of it comes down to cost, and there was a couple of great ones I developed, but I tell you what, there'd be no club in the UK could afford them. So you have to sometimes just go and think, you know, I'd love to go with that level, but they're too expensive. So, but you're right, you want someone that's sort of moving and maybe even has sort of what I'd class as, we developed one with lumps in, so it bounced down the hill. It wasn't always so smooth, and it's a good point, but it's then covering them. It's getting a mold. These injection molds can sometimes be a fortune. So sometimes you just have to develop equipment that you know is going to be affordable, you know.
And a training aid's only so far. You've reiterated the point, even though you are somebody who creates training aids. Live reps is, you know.
Live reps is still, we all want to do that every day. I'd love to do it for every single minute of the day. I'll tell you, there's a good couple of things you can do. You can also pull the bags. So the level 1s and level 2s, you can actually drag along the field so the player can chase them down and can come at different angles from them. They don't always need to be on static, literally sitting there and you go and hit it, you know. There's different ways of developing drills that way. It's a good question.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then I think Pete, for the last one of the night, you did mention you had to put the kids to bed, and I said I'd drag it out so you didn't have to do that duty.
Good lad, Mark. You've done a good job.
Before I ask the last question, Mike, it's worth saying that some of the drills that you've developed with your tackling aids, we've actually uploaded onto our Britballin, not Britballin, our British American football app, the BAFCA app. So if you're looking for videos to help you with your tackling, you can go and have a look at that. And it's a video you did with some of my boys, Richie.
Oh yeah, it's a few years ago now, Pete. A few years ago.
I was looking at the pictures before there, Richie. You got a bit more sugar on the sides now than you did after.
Yeah. I think it's called COVID. So sadly, I got that in November. I think I'm still suffering from COVID fog, actually. So,
really, just what's next? I can imagine, or what are you allowed to tell us what's coming next, Richie?
Yeah, so the next stage for me is I'm really interested in developing what I class as a player-centered approach. I think players are too coach-reliant, and I'm talking football here. You know, they wait for the coach to start the session. They wait until, pre-season. They wait for camp. They wait for this. They wait for the other thing. So I want to look at a study over the next 2 or 3 years, and hopefully we'll get the funding for it, where I want to try and look at technical accuracy and the drop-off in off-season. Now, remember, in the NFL, you're looking at 20, 25 weeks off-season. So there's got to be technical drop-off there. And then how many weeks, how many sessions, with what do we do to get them ready to come back to live play? Can we make them more prepared than they've ever been? But it might be that it's a very player-centered approach where the player has to do it and do a certain 6 weeks, 2 sessions a week, 30 minutes each, and that will get them ready to come back to go live, instead of at the moment where they rock up, change the kit, and it's day one, you know? And remember, as I said at the start of the show, O-line's quite simple. There's a lot of O-line going about off-season. Strength conditioning, movement, footwork, there's a lot of that. I hardly see any tackling, and half the team does it. So your whole defensive room tackles, you know, but most of them don't practice it for 20 plus weeks of the year, which I think there's a huge move could do there. Always looking at equipment. I think I'm pretty happy at the moment with what I've got. I think it covers every area, and I'll always keep looking at methodology. If we can make it 1% better, then it will come into the program, you know. And apart from that, it's just exciting to be involved. I'm really lucky that I'm involved in, 3. When I look at rugby league as well, collision contact sports in general can all help each other in a big way, especially in and around the tackle.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And you know what? And some offenses, depending on who your quarterback, have to get good at tackling if they're throwing interceptions all the time, don't they?
Exactly.
and that player-centered approach, I'm assuming, will you do as best as you possible, because like you have previously, to relay that to kind of every aspect of the game? And what I mean by that, will that be, obviously I know that it's developed for the NFL guys, but will that information be available so like BAFTA guys could pick that up, or GB guys, youth guys?
There's a lot of work to be done, and to be honest, it's not even started yet. It's just a thought, and we're just looking at funding, what university we're going to work with, and research and whatever. But we might even do it with rugby first, because rugby's only a 10-week off season. So literally, if we can prove that it's maybe something different in rugby, then in football you're looking at 25 weeks. So there's a huge correlation there. So I want to do that, and obviously I'm involved in Fiji, so I've signed with the Fijian rugby side up until the World Cup in 2023. So I'll be working with them, and I'll be back and forth to America quite a bit with Riddell, USA Football. So we're going to be busy once I can start travelling again. It's obviously been a quiet year. There's not been a lot of travelling done in the last 12 months. But
if you ever need anyone to carry your bags or anything like that, you give me a shout. Don't speak to Pete. Don't speak to Pete. I've seen his new house. You don't need to worry about anything. You need to worry about paying that off, Peter. And Ben's had a final good question. Do you have any techniques or tips for players that are particularly small taking on taller or even bigger ball carriers? I think that's a really good point for anyone.
Yeah, I always say this, that some of my best tacklers I've ever worked with are the smallest guys, because they have to be technically accurate, and they can also come in underneath the big man, but they've got their connection has to be sometimes more accurate than anybody else, because there's no room for error. But they can make it difficult for big ball carriers because you can get in and underneath them. So when I talked about dip time before, you can actually leave it slightly later, because you're dealing with a player at this height and you're down here. But usually you have to develop being phenomenally accurate at that low level 1-2 tackle, because that's where you're going to go to bring the player down. To go up to level 3, you're going to be taking a big risk. So you've just got to be accurate at 1 and 2 and practice that. But you can come in at real speed, and you can come in under the radar a lot of the times. And as I've said, when I think, rugby union wise, some of the best tacklers were some of your smallest players because they had to be.
Yeah, no, I completely. And plus, as well, you can almost at that point, if your dip point then could almost bait that running back into try and running you over because they see a little guy or the hurdle. But if you keep that dip point low, I agree.
And I was always told as little guys that you can always still go for one leg. You don't need to go for both. Just go full in on that near side, 3 inches above the knee. Get in there, but
just hope you weigh the same as that leg.
You're not going to stop. You're not going to stop the yard doing that. You've got to bring them down. So that's your last chance, saloon, if you're doing that.
Just hope there's someone else near you.
That's where you want your. That's where you want your mate that's going to wreck you to come in over the top of you.
And you don't even mind if he knocks you off the ball. At that point.
It doesn't matter as long as he finishes it off.
Oh, brilliant, Rich! It's been an absolute pleasure. You're welcome back anytime, and maybe we'll catch up next year when you've been travelling again and maybe a little bit further on in what you're doing. And good luck with everything. It's been a pleasure. It's been really good.
Listen, guys, it's great, and it's funny. I said this to Peter about 2 or 3 years ago, and Pete's absolutely spot on. We're both standing there in the gym, and if whoever was the guy who was going to go NFL, there was only going to be one, and it just shows you that. You're just incredibly lucky, and sometimes you're there at the right time in the right place, and you're maybe also thinking slightly differently to everybody else. But as long as we can make a difference and make the game, I just want the players to perform better. I always say that. I'm never a great speaker of health and safety because I think that's like a tick box with a white jacket on. I'll always talk about performance. I just want my players to perform better, and if they can perform better, then I know that they're going to be in a safer environment. So it's just how we bring around quality performance.
And hopefully, I've shared this tonight in the national programme group, so hopefully they can pick up on this and hopefully reach out to you and maybe do something on the national programme level to help those guys along. So, Richie,
hopefully we can get involved.
Richie, thanks very much, man. See you
Pleasure.
soon.
Cheers, guys. Listen, thank you.
Thanks very much.
I really enjoyed it. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Right.
Right, Peter. He came. He said it all.
I mean, you could enjoy that. He's Richie's a great guy, and he's what an innovator. Just having that guy from out with our sport, having that different perspective. And he gave a talk at a basketball conference a few years ago, and stole the show. Guys in the room just loved it, lapped it up.
Yeah, I think we'll have to get into a live basketball, just more for a beer than anything. I'm assuming I reckon it'd be class on a night out. So
yeah, you got to do that on the Friday because usually Saturday I'm just struggling.
Me, you, and Richie will have a night out. Don't worry about it. Right, I think that's everything for tonight. Again, they don't come here to see me and you talk about football, but some really good points there for everyone. To go away, and hopefully we can. Anyone who's watching, feel free to share it and tag in a shit tackler on your team. That's your challenge. If you're watching, tag in the worst tackler on your team. Don't tell him why. just tag him. Pete, thanks very much, guys. Thanks very much for watching. See you later. Bye bye.
Bye for now.